So we got the drug side of this. We have the reason why we went over all of that is not only to connect what's going on with Venezuela, but it's also to show that this whole military CIA drug cartel is also connected to these private groups that are operating all over the world, whether it's Honduras, Venezuela, whether it's Mexico, whether it's Vietnam, Laos, whether it's Afghanistan, so on and so forth. They're all over the place. The network is working with all of them. Why that's important is because that kind of brings us to this situation that just happened. Now, I covered this a little bit on the Wretched Recap on Friday, but we're just going to go a little more in depth. Again, I don't have an answer as far as this story goes, so don't ask me why or for what reason, because I don't have one yet. This is a case that we still need to watch it unfold, and we may not actually get answers, but we still need to be aware of what's going on. And so this just happened. It was 2 National Guard members shot in an ambush attack just blocks from the White House. It says 2 West Virginia National Guard members who deployed to the nation's capital were shot Wednesday afternoon just blocks from the White House. It says the rare shooting of National Guard members on the day before Thanksgiving comes as the presence of the troops in the nation's capital and other cities around the country have been a flashpoint issue for months, fueling court fights and a broader public policy debate about the Trump administration's use of the military to combat what officials cast out as an out-of-control crime problem. As we know, or maybe you don't, but we talked about it on Friday, and I think we talked about this order that was on Tuesday, I think, where there was a judge that basically declared the deploying of National Guard in D.C. as unlawful. She gave the Trump administration 21 days to either remove them or to file an appeal. So during this period of time, the Trump administration either needed to withdraw them or place an appeal. It creates a window, and I'm just giving a theory. I'm just giving an idea. Again, take it with what you will. It gives the Trump administration a window to do something like this, which would basically say, see, told you that we needed to do it. And so they could not only keep them there, but extend it or expand it in some type of way. That's a possibility. That's all I'm saying is it's a possibility. Keep that in mind. It also says the initiative brought roughly 70, did I skip some or something? Right here. This was supposed to be highlighted. This is the 29-year-old suspect, an Afghan national, entered the U.S. in 2021 through Operations Allies Welcome, a Biden administration program that evacuated and resettled tens of thousands of Afghans after the United States withdrawal from the country. This is the initiative brought roughly 76,000 people to the United States, many of whom had worked alongside U.S. troops and diplomats as interpreters and translators. That's the important thing. Many of whom had worked alongside U.S. troops and diplomats as interpreters and translators in that country. So there's a connection there to the network. It says the suspect who has been living in Washington State. I highlighted that and I wanted to bring that forward because the whole thing doesn't make sense if you look at it from just the logistical standpoint. This dude is in Washington, over on the Pacific coast, over there. And he decided he was going to drive from Washington, even though he has a family. It says Lakanwal, that's the guy, arrived in Bellingham, Washington, around 79 miles north of Seattle with his wife and 5 children. So he's over in Washington. He's got a wife. He's got 5 children. He's been living here for years. We'll get into that a little bit later. He's been living here for years. And he decides now is the time to drive all the way to D.C. with a .357 handgun, a revolver, and just randomly walk up and shoot 2 National Guard members. Explain that one to me. Maybe there's mental illness, maybe there's something, I don't know. But if you're just looking at it from a logistical standpoint, it makes no sense. Just keep that in mind. It says the Trump administration quickly ordered 500 more National Guard members to Washington, of course, expansion. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Trump asked him to send the troops. Nearly 2,200 troops currently are assigned to the Joint Task Force operating in the city, according to the government's latest website. Again, we're still in the window of you need to withdraw them or issue an appeal. So keep that in mind. Now, this is where things, again, just don't make sense. It says troops held down the shooter. The shooting happened roughly 2 blocks northwest of the White House near a metro station. Hearing gunfire, other troops in the area ran over and held down the gunman after he was shot. So, you're going to issue a double tap, kill them all order to random alleged drug traffickers in a boat off the coast of Venezuela. But when it comes to a guy on U.S. soil who shot 2 National Guardsmen, you're not going to kill him, but you're going to hold him down? Again, logic don't fly. I'll just leave it at that. Let's get a little bit more information. DC shooting suspect was granted asylum in April. Okay. Interesting. This is according to the New York Times and ABC News. Lakanwal was granted asylum in April 2025 under President Donald Trump, who has blamed former President Joe Biden for Lakanwal's entrance into the U.S. in 2021. So President Trump, and I've seen the video, he called a reporter stupid and screamed at her for asking the question. You guys can find the video if you want to. It's there. Who said, well, you're saying that he came in during Biden's thing, but yet your administration granted him official asylum. Your administration didn't do the vetting. So not only was he vetted, quote unquote, for the multiple years of working with the CIA over in Afghanistan, we'll get to that, for the multiple years there, then he needed to be vetted to actually come in during this situation, the Biden's welcome group thing. Can't think of the name of it. And then he needed, in order to be granted asylum and residence in the United States, he needed to be vetted then. That was your job. Why didn't you do that? So we've got this dude who managed to make it through the CIA, working through a CIA group in Afghanistan, welcomed in during the Biden administration, and then grant him asylum during the Trump administration. Again, left-right paradigm don't fly. It's all the same team. CIA Director John Ratcliffe said Thursday that Lakanwal worked with the CIA-backed military units in Afghanistan. So even John Ratcliffe is confirming the dude worked with the CIA. While addressing the attacks on Wednesday night, President Donald Trump said the Department of Homeland Security is confident that the suspect in custody is a foreigner who entered our country from Afghanistan. Trump claimed he was flown into the United States by the Biden administration in September 2021, which is true. We know that. And his status was extended under legislation signed by President Biden. We know that too. Likely referring to the Operations Allies Welcome, which allowed certain Afghan asylum seekers to remain in the U.S. for 2 years. So again, worked with the CIA, brought in by Biden, extended during Operations Allies Welcome, and then granted asylum April of this year. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem reiterated this on X, saying that Lakanwal is an Afghan national who was one of the many unvetted mass paroled into the United States under Operation Allies Welcome. She is literally saying that he was unvetted. It was her administration that was supposed to vet him. She literally just dunked on herself, saying that they failed at their job. This is the Post. It says the suspect that shot our brave National Guardsman is an Afghan national who is the one of many unvetted mass paroled into the United States under Operations Ally Welcome on September 8, 2021, under the Biden administration. What are they doing? They're playing political theater. They're trying to get the sides to continue to be fired up at each other. They want the monkeys to continue to throw poo at each other. This is theater. This is the popcorn side of cocaine and popcorn. This is what I'm talking about. Don't get fooled by this. This is just government. It's just corruption. That's all it is. It's not left-right. It's not Democratic-Republican. It's not Trump-Biden. It is literally just government. That's why it's so important that we don't fall into it. It says the NBC report added that Lakanwal served in the Afghan army for 10 years, alongside U.S. Special Forces. That takes us back into Obama's stuff. So now it's Obama. Now it's Biden. Now it's Trump. Now it's all of them, all three of them. Lakanwal had been stationed at a base in Kandahar, Afghanistan's second largest city, while serving in the country's army. The report added, citing Lakanwal's relative, "We were the ones that were targeted by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Lakanwal was a part of the paramilitary force that worked with the CIA, known as the Zero Unit, according to the New York Times. We'll get to them as well, which noted that units built a reputation for their brutality and were considered death squads by human rights groups. Suffered from mental. It's possible that Lakanwal suffered from mental health issues and was disturbed by the casualties his unit has caused. Again, it's a possibility. We don't know. We don't know for sure what the situation was. So it's possible that that was the case. It's possible that it was something else. I'm just giving you guys the information, and we go from there. We also have this. It says officials criticized Biden vetting, but Afghan shooting suspect was granted asylum under Trump. It says the Trump administration on Thursday blamed Biden-era vetting failures for the admission of the Afghan immigrant suspected of shooting 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C., but the alleged gunman was granted asylum this year under President Donald Trump, according to U.S. government files seen by Reuters, and there's been other outlets that have confirmed that those files do indeed exist. FBI Director Kash Patel and Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, both Trump appointees, said during a press conference on Thursday that the Biden administration had failed to conduct adequate background checks or vetting on Lakanwal before allowing him to enter the U.S. in 2021. Neither official provided any evidence to support their assertion. Again, we can just go with what we're being told there. Under the Operations Ally Program, or Welcome Program, Afghans evacuated to the U.S. were granted a 2-year parole that allowed them to live and work legally and then apply for a more permanent status. The document reviewed said Lakanwal applied for asylum in December of 2024 and was approved on April 23rd of this year, 3 months after Trump took office. Lakanwal, 29, who resided in Washington state, had no known criminal history, the officials said. The government file in Lakanwal said that he had been vetted by the U.S. because of his work with the U.S. government partners during the war in Afghanistan, with no potentially disqualifying information had been found. Now, maybe these people were involved with the drug trade happening in Afghanistan too. We don't necessarily know that, but it is interesting. It says this animal would have never been here if not for Joe Biden's dangerous policies, which allowed countless unvetted criminals to invade our country and harm the American people, said Abigail Jackson, a White House spokesperson. CIA Director John Ratcliffe said in a statement that Lakanwal had worked with the CIA-backed local units in Afghanistan. So again, they're just throwing shade at each other, going back and forth. It's their fault. Even though we were the one that were supposed to vet him to grant him asylum, it's their fault. Even though they're the ones that worked with the CIA, it's their fault. And so it's just more finger pointing going on there. We also have this. It says DC shooting suspect could not tolerate the violence of a CIA-backed unit in Afghanistan, said a childhood friend. A CIA and an Afghan intelligence official said that the shooter had been part of the Afghan partner force known as the Zero Unit, trained and supported by the agency in the southern province of Kandahar. So again, we're just getting a recount from a friend. So again, take with it what you will. The Afghan refugee accused of shooting 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. fought in the late days of the United States war there as part of his Zero Unit, paramilitary force that worked with the CIA, according to a person briefed on the investigation and an Afghan intelligence officer familiar with the matter. The units were known for their brutality and labeled death squads by human rights groups. A childhood friend who asked to be identified only as Muhammad because he feared the Taliban reprisals, said that Mr. Lakanwal had suffered from mental health issues and was disturbed by the casualty his unit had caused. Members of the Zero Units were among the thousands of Afghans relocated to the United States under the Biden administration after the chaotic withdrawal of U.S. troops in August of 2021, which we know the drug trafficking trade ended there, and that's what caused this withdrawal. That's why we went through all that history, because it shows that all this stuff is connected. And it allowed the Taliban to retake control of the country, which again, you go back to the 80s, the Taliban was funded and established by the U.S. When the whole Afghan situation was happening. They were fighting the Soviets in the country. One of the operations that was going on, if you want to look up more information, it's called Operation Cyclone. Go take a look at that and you'll find out what was going on. It also says the CIA has denied the allegations of brutality among the units, saying that they were the result of the Taliban propaganda. Current and former officials say that the units played an important role in the American evacuation of Afghanistan. The units helped both the U.S. citizens and Afghan partners flee to the airport and get on the flights out of the country. So again, this is just being recalled from a friend. We can only do so much that we can with that. Take it with what you will. So let's learn about these Zero Units a little bit to get an idea of what's going on here. It says, what were the Afghan Zero Units that sources say the National Guard shooting suspect worked for? It says an image of an ID badge circulating widely online. You guys can find that. I don't have it to show you, but you can find it. circulating widely online that shows that the suspect in the shooting of the National Guard members says he was assigned to the Canadar Strike Force, or O3 unit, one of the number of so-called zero units that work closely with the United States and other foreign forces during the war in Afghanistan. A former senior Afghan military source confirmed that the ID badge is indeed authentic. The units were exclusively composed of Afghan nationals and operated under the umbrella of the National Directorate of Security, or NDS, the intelligence agency established with the CIA backing the Afghanistan's previous US-backed government. So I know there's a lot of like, what, when it comes to this stuff. The fact is we understand that it's literally the CIA pinning the CIA against each other in order to establish the stuff. The CIA was involved with the Taliban. The CIA was involved with these death squads. The CIA was involved with the drug trafficking. And so the CIA was orchestrating all this stuff, all these different groups that were fighting each other at the same time in the same country. Why? Because it granted them the ability to have access to that region for whatever they wanted to do. Drugs, military, minerals, and all that type of stuff. So don't get confused by all of that. They were considered by the U.S. and its international partners to be among the most trusted domestic forces in Afghanistan. Those units were often labeled death squads by human rights groups. The units were known in Afghanistan for their secrecy and alleged brutality, and members were implicated in numerous extrajudicial killings of civilians, particularly during night raids. We'll get to those details in just a second. The image of the ID badge also carries the word Firebase Gecko, which was the name of the base used by the CIA and the Special Forces in Kandahar in southern Afghanistan, inside what was previously the compound of the Taliban's founding leader, Mullah Mohammed Omar. So the CIA and the Special Forces, along with this unit that this guy was a part of, was using the Taliban's founding leader's compound as a base of operations. Imagine that. Who would have thought? All right, let's get to some details about this group. What we know about the U.S.-backed zero units in Afghanistan. This was a report in 2023. It says at least 452 civilians were killed in 107 raids. This number was almost certainly an undercount. While some raids did result in the capture or death of known militants, others killed bystanders or appeared to target people for no clear reasons. So this unit, this particular kill squad here, killed at least 452 civilians in 107 raids. Just kill them. Troubling number of raids appeared to have relied upon faulty intelligence by the CIA and other U.S. intelligence gathering services. 2 Afghan zero unit soldiers described raids they were sent on in which they said their targets were chosen by the United States. So they're just picking and choosing people. You need to go kill this person in the middle of the night. Anybody gets in your way, take them out. And if there's any loose ends, take them out. That's what was going on. The former head of Afghanistan's intelligence agency acknowledged that the units were getting it wrong at times and killing civilians. He oversaw the zero units during the crucial period and agreed that no one paid a consequence for those botched raids. Nobody should be surprised by that. The Afghan soldiers weren't alone in the raids. U.S. Special Operations Forces soldiers working with the CIA often joined them. The Afghan soldiers Billings spoke to said that they were typically accompanied on raids by at least 10 U.S. Special Operations Forces soldiers. It's possible that those were ones connected to JSOC and Fort Bragg. We don't know. I should probably look into that and see if there is a connection there, but it's possible that they were, because we know JSOC was heavily involved with Afghanistan. It says military planners baked potential collateral damage into the pre-raid calculus. How many women, children, non-combatants were at risk if the raid went awry, according to one U.S. Army Ranger Billings spoke to. Those forecasts were often wildly off, he said. No one seemed to really care. It says you go on night raids, make more enemies. Then when you got to go kill, or when you got to go on more night raids for the more enemies that you have to kill. So basically, go on night raids, kill some people. The people find out about it. Now those people are angry at the U.S. soldiers. So now the U.S. soldiers got to go on another night raid to kill those people. And so the more people you kill, the more enemies you make. That's what's going on. I think there was a movie that just came out not too long ago that showed this. They made an emphasis on it. I think it has Brad Pitt in it. And he's talking about, you go into a town and you have 10 enemies. How many enemies do you actually have? And everybody, all the military people in the room said, you got 10 enemies. He said, no, you have 50. Because every person that you kill has 2 friends. Or you have 100. Every enemy that you kill, they have 2 friends. And so every person that you kill, those 2 friends who wasn't thinking about joining the operation because they saw you kill their friend, now they're wanting to join up. So those 2 friends get involved, then those 2 friends. And so every person that you kill, you end up creating 2 more enemies on top of it. I can't remember what the movie is. Maybe somebody in the chat knows what it is, but I remember seeing that scene and it made sense. That's what they're talking about here. It says, because the Zero units operated under a CIA program, their actions were part of a classified war, with the lines of accountability so obscured that no one had to answer for the operations that went wrong. And U.S. responsibility for the raids was quietly muddied by a legal loophole that allows the CIA and any other U.S. soldiers linked to the agency for the operations to act without the same level of oversight as the American military. It goes on to say the U.S. military and intelligence agencies have long relied on night raids by forces like the O2 unit to fight insurgencies around the globe. It says eyewitnesses, survivors, and family members described how Zero unit soldiers had stormed into their homes at night, killing loved ones at more than 30 raid sites being visited. No Afghan or U.S. officials returned to investigate, which is pretty interesting. Well, they're not killing people that we know of. You'll notice that these night raids are now starting to happen in the United States to go after immigrants. We've been talking a lot about stuff like that. If you pay attention, the same tactics of night raids back then, while they're not just straight up killing these people, but the night raids are happening. Helicopter drops into apartment buildings, pulling people out in the middle of the night, going into people's homes in the middle of the night. They're handcuffing 5-year-old children. They're forcing people out in the middle of the streets in their underwear, so on and so forth. The same tactics that they were doing in Afghanistan are starting to make a presence in the United States. And they're using the immigration to get you to go along with it. Just something to note. We also have this: suspect in shooting of National Guard members face murder charge as U.S. halts asylum decision. So this just came out. It says charges against the man accused of shooting 2 National Guard members have been upgraded to first-degree murder after one of the soldiers died. It was the female, Beckstrom. The United States Attorney for the District of Columbia announced Friday, while investigators continue to seek motive. Says the Trump administration on Friday, it is said it is halting all asylum decisions and has paused issuing visas for people traveling with Afghan passports. They're preparing for something. I don't know what it is, but they're preparing for something. Says Trump called the shooting a terrorist attack and criticized the Biden administration for enabling Afghans who worked with the United States Special Forces during the Afghanistan war to enter the United States. The president has also wanted to permanently pause migration from poorer nations and expel millions of immigrants from the country. He also, I'll say it after this, the director of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Joseph Edlow, said in a post on the social platform X that asylum decisions will be paused until we can ensure that every alien is vetted and screened to the maximum degree possible. It's also worth noting that Trump has also said, this is the second time he said it. He said it months ago, but he just said it again, that they are looking to denaturalize citizens. So United States citizens that have come and have been naturalized into the country, they're looking to denaturalize them and deport them out if they don't agree with Trump's politics. He has made reference to that twice now, and he just made reference to it a couple days ago. So he's looking to withdraw naturalized citizens and deport them if they don't agree with Trump's politics. That's the next step. Then guess who comes after that? The ones who were born here. I also want to make reference to this. We reported on this. This was in September, but it may be playing a part here. Trump suggests U.S. troops could return to base in Afghanistan. This was September 18th. Says Trump on Thursday. This was September 18th of this year. Suggested that is working to reestablish a U.S. presence at Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan 4 years after America's chaotic withdrawal from the country left the base in Taliban's hands. Which is interesting. He says, look to reestablish a presence at the base. It's basically confirming, which, again, there's other stuff out there that confirms it as well, but this is just another confirmation that we still have soldiers in Afghanistan. Just because we had a withdrawal doesn't mean we're not still there. Just keep that in mind. Looks like they just want to reestablish the base. We're trying to get it back, Trump said of the base. This is while Trump describes his call for the U.S. military to reestablish a position in Afghanistan as breaking news. The Republican president has previously raised the idea, and so on and so forth. So we covered that as well, but there's a chance that all this aggression with Afghanistan that's currently happening right now could be a reason for them to take over the base and start establishing more presence in Afghanistan again. So take with that what you will. On the heels of this, they also announced this as well. This was the 20th that this came out. DHS announces final rule to advance the biometric entry-exit program. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has announced that the publication of the Notice of Final Rule titled Collection of Biometric Data from Aliens Upon Entry to and Departure from the United States. This milestone regulation advances DHS' effort to implement a comprehensive biometric entry-exit program, enhancing national security and streamlining identity verification processes for foreign visitors traveling to and from the United States. This is something that we were talking about from the very beginning, going back to 2024, the beginning of all this stuff. Trump was going to use the immigration process in order to bring in the dystopian digital biometric surveillance system. First, it's going to be for the immigration. Then it's going to be for the U.S. citizen. This stuff is not for the immigrants. This stuff is prepping for us. And how are they doing that? Trump comes in with his cult of personality. Everybody agrees that we need to get rid of the immigration stuff. Well, how is one way that we can do that? We start issuing this biometric system. Everybody goes, yay, we need that to keep the immigrants out. And then all of a sudden it gets flipped over and goes, now we're going to use it for you to make sure that you're not an immigrant. And everybody goes, yay, that's okay. I've got nothing to hide, so I don't need to worry about that. Not realizing that they are accepting the very same thing that if you asked them 2 years ago, they were screaming at the top of their lungs was coming, and they were not in favor of it. But because it's Trump, but because they used the orchestrated event of the immigration problem, everybody's accepting of it. And here it is. Here it is. This is the final rule effective December 26, 2025, amends existing. So it's coming up this year. Next month, this will be active. Amends existing DHS regulations to authorize U.S. Customs and Border Protection, an operational component within DHS, to collect facial biometrics from all non-citizens upon entry and exit at airports, land ports, seaports, and other authorized ports of departure. This removes prior exemptions, including diplomats and most Canadian visitors. It also removes limitations on pilot programs and expands biometric collection to new transportation modalities, including sea exit, private aircraft, vehicle entry exit, and pedestrian exit. Goes on to say, this final rule marks a major milestone towards our efforts to successfully implement the biometric entry-exit mandate and strengthen the security of the United States, said Acting Executive Assistant Commissioner, CBP Office of Field Operations, Diane J. Sabatino. With increased funding to support this critical mission, we will continue to expand facial biometrics and advanced technology for identity verification to further secure and innovate the entry-exit process, air, sea, and land. In early 2017, Donald Trump issued an executive order requiring expedited completion and implementation of biometric entry and exit. It's funny because I continue to get told by people who support Trump that Trump had nothing to do with wanting to get a digital biometric surveillance system up. And I kept telling them that he set up the ground floor for it during his first administration. And everybody said that you're an idiot and that you don't know anything about it and that Trump is here to save us for that. And now look at what happened. He set it up in his first term. Then they brought in Biden to create the chaos in order to execute what Trump set up in his first term. if you just look at it, it's so simple. A kindergartner can come up with that one. This is literally the very definition of problem, reaction, solution. It's right there in front of our faces. But you have to stop playing the left-right paradigm game. You have to exit the cult of personality politics. You have to get rid of that deceptive hedge in order to see what's really going on. And once you do, it's so simple. It's so simple. It's like they just took a piece of paper and they wrote it in crayon and said, let's do this. And sure enough, it worked. Because country plays the political game. Goes on to say, as part of this effort, CBP built the Traveler Verification System, a secure cloud-based facial biometrics matching service to automate the identity verification process and reduce administrative burdens on officers. Now, this is where they're lying to you, and I'll show you why. It says, although U.S. citizens are not covered by this rule, they may continue to voluntarily participate in the facial biometrics process at entry and exit. U.S. citizens who prefer to opt out of the facial biometrics process may simply notify a CBP officer or airline representative and undergo manual inspection of their passport as required by international travel. But they just announced this. No real ID. It could cost you $18 to go through TSA checkpoints under proposed rule. Okay. It says airline passengers without a real ID or passport could face an $18 fee under a new rule proposed by the Transportation Security Administration. Under the proposed rule, set to be published in the Federal Register on Thursday, travelers without the required identification will have their identity verified on a new biometric kiosk system before they're permitted to pass through checkpoint. But you just said that it was voluntary. We didn't have to do it. But now they're saying that if you don't have the correct ID, you're going to have to do it anyways and pay a fee on top of it. The $18 fee, which will allow passengers to access TSA checkpoints for 10 days, will be used to help pay for the new technology, according to the notice. And the thing is we talked about this. We were wondering what it was. Remember when DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announced the $1 billion TSA investment on new technology? Found it. Found it. It's right there. It says the Federal Real ID Act was passed by Congress in 2005 in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Oh, problem, reaction, solution again. After years of delay, which, by the way, again, we've gone over it before, the people involved with the 9/11 attacks, United States intelligence, Saudi Arabia intelligence, and Israeli intelligence. Go look it up. After years of delays, the Department of Homeland Security in May finally began enforcing the Real ID requirement for travelers on domestic flights. If a traveler goes through a TSA checkpoint without a real ID or passport, TSA plans to use what it's referencing as a modernized alternative identity verification program to verify their identity through the individual's biometric biographic information, according to the notice. So not only will you have to give up your biometric data in order to fly, but on top of that, you're going to be paying for the very technology that's taking your biometric data. That should make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. See, not only are they going to stick their thumb on it, but they're going to make you voluntarily pay money for sticking their thumb on you. It's genius, really. Rounding this out, how are we doing on time? We're going to go a little late. Just hang with me. We got to get through all this stuff, though. It's all connected. So hang with me. I'll try and get you out here quick. It says judge rules Trump's DC National Guard deployment was illegal. So this is what I was referencing early on. I want to bring this up again because there's something I'm going to show you that may be something. It may not. I will just leave it at that. So judge rules Trump DC National Guard deployment was illegal or unlawful. It's technically unlawful in the actual written paper. And then this is saying illegal. Take with that what you will. It says a federal judge ruled Thursday that President Donald Trump's deployment of 2,000 National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. was illegal, concluding he lacks authority to send troops in for the deterrence of crime. U.S. District Judge Yacob said that while Trump may be the commander-in-chief of the Guard, his power is constrained by federal laws that limit how those troops can be federalized and deployed, particularly in Washington, D.C., which is controlled by Congress. So we called for that. Judge said, not going to happen. You either need to withdraw or appeal. And they gave a window of 21 days, which is a very large window. It's usually somewhere about a week, but they gave them 21 days. Interesting. It's just interesting. That's all. I'm not inferring anything. It's just fascinating why it's bigger. But still. So then we know during this period of time, the shooter comes in, shoots the National Guard. They deploy 500 more troops and so on and so forth. We see what's happening there. Why I'm bringing this up? Because the judge issued this November 20th, 2025. November 20th, 2025. Why is that important? Some people have found, which Google has conveniently wiped away now, but I did confirm that it is true, that Google Trend searches. So for those who search on Google, it creates a chart that you can, if you type in the name and the region that you're looking, it'll show the trend of how many people are looking up that person on such and such day. Well, 2 people in the District of Washington, D.C. searched the name Rahmanullah Lakanwal, the shooter of the National Guard, on November 20th, 2025. Why is there 2 people in Washington, D.C. looking up this random Afghan dude who lives in Washington State on the same day that the judge issues the unlawful order of deployment for National Guard members? That's 6 days before the shooting. Then, if that's not enough, hours before the shooting on the same day, so jumping over 6 days ahead, on the same day, hours before, 84 people searched his name in D.C. at 2:24 a.m. 100 people searched his name at 3:28 a.m. and 22 people searched his name at 8 a.m. All hours before the shooting even occurred in D.C. Now, always take Google Trend searches with a grain of salt. I can't begin to stress that enough. This cannot be used as like a definitive thing. But it's fascinating that this dude's name was searched in D.C. by 2 people 6 days before the shooting on the same day that the judge issued the unlawful order. Something tells me there's a couple of morons that caught wind of this in DC and searched his name on a public database, and that's why it popped up. And as I said, Google went and wiped this data yesterday. So, pretty interesting.